Welcome to this special meeting of Council 2024 Budget Deliberations. It is Monday, April the 2nd. We are in the council chambers as well as those who are attending virtually. We offer welcome. May I ask Council if there's any disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof? Councillor Halpin, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Sloan. Per the email that we talked about last year, my children are beneficiaries of staff salary. And so I was advised that that's a pecuniary interest and that I should move to divide the question of staff salaries.
Can I get a seconder to divide the motion, please? Or second for the motion to divide? Deputy Mayor Noble.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Halpin, seconded by Deputy Mayor Noble, that the matter be divided with the general government section of the budget being separated.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Councillor Halpin, you have a quizzical look.
Only that the general government is a very large swath and it was the employee salaries, but I think that there was some understanding about that.
Ms. Greeno, any comments, questions? Are we in good stead for those that are declaring to having the vote split?
I will look to, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will look to our treasurer, Dave Aristone. I thought we had maybe given some direction this earlier.
Thank you, Ms. Greeno. Mr. Aristone.
Mr. Mayor, through to Councillor Halpin. Yeah, I sort of researched the matter and gave some advice to the councillor in the fact that since salaries, union and non-union, were dealt separately by council, and that you could declare your interests at that time, that wouldn't affect the overall, approval of the budget based on, budget totals. So that was sort of the advice I gave. So I didn't really think that the separation needed to be done.
Okay, thank you. Did you have a question, comment, Councillor Halpin?
Thank you. A comment, Mayor Sloan, only that Mr. Mascaren's email did not consider that whether you had or hadn't already voted on increases would change that you still have an interest in it when it's in the budget. So to make sure that I'm acting properly, I'd like to make sure that I'm doing to make sure that I'm acting as the Integrity Commissioner directed. I would feel more comfortable to do as he gave instruction in his email.
Ms. Greeno.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Then, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Then we will look to reshape the motion just to remove salaries and hold them separate. That will take us a few minutes to do. We were not anticipating that we would be removing salaries from the motion. Would it just be for general government salaries? Yeah. Yep. We can go through the presentation and then reshape that.
Okay,
Those,
is that fair? Right. Thank you, folks. So we're continuing on. Budget presentation, DFS 0624. I'm passing it over to you, Mr. Aristone, with thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to present this 2024 budget on behalf of staff to you. I have with me today, just to help get through the process, is Deputy Treasurer Neil Conzelman with me to my right, just in case you didn't know who he was. First of all, I'd just like to go through what I intend the process to be as we go through the budget. First of all, I would like to review my covering report and highlight some of the important items on that 4-page report. And the second thing I'd like to do is then review the net operating revenue and expenditure summary on page 7 of the actual budget for changes that year to year have occurred. I don't intend to look at the individual departmental budgets unless a question arises on that specific budget. The third thing I'd like to do is review the capital summary on page 81 for the 2024 projects. And the fourth thing I would like to do is highlight the sections at the back, which have other things such as reserve projections for 2023-24, the insurance comparisons between 23 and 24, and the BIA levy requested for 2024. And last, at any time during the presentation, if there are questions from council, feel free to just interrupt and we'll address those questions at that period of time. Okay? That fine with everybody?
I'm getting nodding of assent. Thank you, sir.
Okay. So the first item is if you could turn to my covering report in the 4 pages. First thing I'd like to highlight is under the taxation section on page 2. So the 2023 tax levy was the 16,583,349 shown there. I've just analyzed to you how we got to the 17,219,505 for 2024. It relates to 4% growth on the assessment because I've used the same tax rates for 2024 within this budget as the 2023 and the 2022. So the increase of the 156 relates to all assessment growth, which is 4%. Second thing I want to point out to you below, I wanted to also give you information what 1% increase would equate to, and that's in the chart just below. So a 1% increase equates to about 172,195 in additional taxes raised. Under the operating budget section on page 3, I just wanted to highlight for you the changes between the 2023-24 operating budgets. For 2024, we've actually reduced the operating budget reliance on tax levy by $198,004, highlighted in that chart, which is a 1.43% decrease in the net operating budget. That's expenditures less revenues. Along with the tax levy increase of the 156, which relates to growth, we were able to put in a total of $654,160 extra into the capital levy for 2024. Next, under the capital budget section, that $854,160 equates to a total of $3.6 million now in capital levy going in 2024. And because of the various projects we're doing outlined later in the report, we actually are able to put 1.6 million into a infrastructure reserve that we just don't need for this year's capital plan for future capital expenditures. Now, also under the capital budget section, I've highlighted 2 sort of major areas. The Port Sullivan Stormwater Management Project and the Harbor Asset Management Plan that we'll be looking at some significant, levy costs in the near period of 7 years. So those are highlighted for you. And then the other projects I've listed there that have come up through a council or public consideration during the year, and those are highlighted for your information. And then last, the conclusion, where even though this budget is based on 0% increase, we're recommending a 2% with the extra 344,000 being put into the infrastructure reserve to make it approximately 1.9 million. Now, just on a note, what does 2% mean? Unfortunately, we deal in averages. We don't deal in specifics. So the average residentially assessed property in 2024 is about 271,000. And that's not in front of you. That's just some information I have. The taxes on that property for the Central Elgin portion would have been $2,264 in 2023. And in 2024, they would be $2,309, which is about a $45 difference. Okay. Any questions on that information I presented this time?
I have a question, Chair Snow. When we talk about the dredging, which we just completed in 2023, we've now got till you're guessing till 2031.
Yeah, I'm assessing that based on just what I've heard through staff discussions, but I can let the director speak to that.
No, well, sorry, it wasn't to the number. It was just how you put in reserve for it. So if you look at it, you start planning now for your longer term expenditures.
That's one of the purposes of the 1.6 million is that and some other things that are occurring with the stormwater management project that we're, going to go through, that council approved back last January in 2023.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, moving on now, if we want to turn to page 7, which is the budget summary of the net revenue expenditures. The first line, taxation, I've already mentioned that the 4.1% increase is mainly due to the growth in assessment, and it's based on 0% increase on the rest of the assessment. I don't know if there's any questions on that. None? I'll proceed. The council budget's up 15.6, mainly with legal and training costs of $30,000 that have been added to that. The next to general government, it's net decrease of 3%, mainly due to some costs and revenues increasing and some costs being down. Are any specific questions on that? Next is the Conservation Authority. That's up 8.5. That's catfish and kettle. I can't speak to the increases, but you do have members on both those. And if there are questions, I guess we can refer to them. Being none, the medical center is down 1.4%. The Belmont Library has no impact on levy. We set aside the net revenue each year into a reserve. The Joint Accessibility Committee, none of the costs have changed on it. Cemetery costs are down 9.3%. The fire department's at a 0% increase. Any questions on fire department budget?
Sure. Sorry, Dave, if you can just explain to me here with the actuals were 2.2 and 3.2. If you want to just explain that, spell that one out for me.
Okay, so we're looking at page 19 then?
I'm looking at page 7 and I'm looking at fire department.
Yes.
You're 19.
Oh, okay, the actual then.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Is that the truck?
yeah, it's the money, it's the money we transferred into the reserve. We sold a piece of property for 963,000 net. So that 963 transfer to the reserve is included in that 3.2 million. If you take that out, it's pretty well on budget.
Okay.
And we can
Now-
look at the specific budget if you wanted to see that.
The deputy mayor has a question.
Okay.
Thanks, David.
Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Are we gonna, as we go through this page, are we going to talk about each budget? Is that the opportunity? Okay, I just have a little one. The natural gas cost for the new fire station is more than the other three combined. I'm just wondering if somebody could explain that. It seems concerning that we have a new net zero building and the natural gas for that building was $9,000 and the other two were 25-ish each. So if somebody could speak to that, that'd be awesome.
Thank you, deputy mayor. I'm seeing the chief taking this one.
Through you, Mayor Sloan, to Deputy Mayor Noble. Yes, that surprised me at the end of the year as well. We had somebody look at it. It's the outside pad at the rear of the fire station. That's a concrete pad. And it has in-ground heating so that in the event in the wintertime, trucks do not slide into the back end of the station. For some reason, it was set to 72 or 73 degrees instead of 32 degrees, 33 degrees. So that's the reason why that has been adjusted down to 32, 33 degrees to keep it just at a melting point now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Airstone.
Continue on then. Next one is the police services, which is the OPP contract, and it's estimated to be a 1.8% increase. Now, there are some changes going on with the way that contract is organized, and so that just needs to be dealt with later on when those details come out and how it's going to be organized. It was previously through the county, but it might have to be differently.
And just on that, so council knows, I've changed the formation of the boards. It's going to have to come back to this council to reappoint someone. So it's been in the making for 3 or 4 years, these changes, and they start, I think, April the 1st yesterday. So it will come to council in the next meeting. Okay, thanks, Mr. Airstone.
Moving on to emergency services, which is the planning, I think, part of the chief's budget. It's not changing the $5,000. The bylaw enforcement is funded through the parking reserve, so it has no impact on the levy. But if there's any questions on it, on that part, we'll take them now. None. The animal control is down 3.6%.
Sorry, I was just wondering who does
Yeah,
our animal
we have a
control?
contract,
With a
control service with,
private company?
partly with the city and partly with a veterinarian, don't we?
Okay, just curious. Thank you.
Building services, doesn't have an impact on the levy, the net revenue or the net expenses flowed in and out of the building reserve. Same thing with the parking, the net parking revenue is transferred to a reserve. The next department, infrastructure and community services, that's a new name. So previously, that was the asset management department and the development services department. Under the new structure, it's been combined by the director. And I explained sort of that in my report, how that occurred. So it's showing a 39% increase, but it's all related to reallocating of staff costs between other budgets and this budget. And it's mainly the public works roads below, which is, as you noticed, is down 4.3%. So we'll go on to the public works and roads. It's down 4.3%. And as I mentioned, there's salaries been reallocated up to the infrastructure and community services. Any questions on that? Waste management is down 43%. That's really due to the recycling being transferred to a private contractor through the new process by the province. Next is the parks. Now that's up 5.1%. That's mainly and generally due to the grass cutting costs that we do through a contractor. Next one is the beach. It's up 3.8 and mainly relates to the patrol salaries. The actual maintenance of the beach is at basically a 0% increase, that part of the budget. Street lighting is next, 6.4. That's up really due to repairs that are contracted out. Any questions? Next two items are the arenas, Belmont and Port Stanley. They're both down 15 and 25 respectively. Partly due to revenues are starting to creep up again post-COVID. And plus there's been some repairs, I shouldn't say renovate, rehabilitation of some of the ventilation systems and have decreased the electric costs there on both arenas. Municipal drains is down 63%. That's mainly to a salary reallocation up to the infrastructure and community services line. County roads is 100% decrease. So last year was budgeted to have some of our levy go to those costs. That wasn't necessary because the actual county roads budget was less than what they actually pay us to maintain it per kilometer. So we were able to put money into reserve, and this year anything that, just want to look at that budget. I can't remember if we're suggesting something goes into it right now. Do you remember? Coming out of reserve to offset in the county? There is maybe a little bit, yeah. The lift bridge is up 4.2%. I think that's mainly due to salaries for the part-time staff there. The harbor has no impact on the levy. The money we receive on leases, the net revenue there goes into a reserve. Now, the water and the wastewater aren't shown here because they have no impact on the levy. So they're separate budgets on page 67 and 75. Hopefully you reviewed those. I don't have any comments on those unless you have questions. Seeing none, last time is the capital levy. As I pointed out previously, it's gone up about 800,000 or 31%, which is a significant amount, but I think it's well needed.
Question, Mr. Airstone, how is that invested?
Well, the majority, 1.6 million of that, 3.6 million is going to that infrastructure reserve. So we're only actually using 2 million for this year's projects. Now, one of the reasons why we don't need the levy is Front Street, which is a major project when we get to it. We've got 2 years with a levy that's been set aside in 22 and 23 for that project. And it wasn't done until this year, so we didn't need levy for that project this year. So that's one of the reasons you have that extra money. Are there any?
Mr. Airstone, Councillor Connors has a question.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Mr. Airstone, I just want to.
Right. 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 The fire services stuff is, the other capital projects are not. That list of 3.8 million are not. Yeah. We're not recommending proceeding with them because they're not within the asset management plan for 2024. Why don't we do it during the capital section? Okay.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions on the operating part of the budget that we've gone through quite quickly? But as you can see, a lot of the items have gone down because the operating budget is relying less on tax levy by 198,000. So staff feel, you know, they've done their job in that sense of reducing the operating budget by 198,000, and that can be utilized towards the capital program. If there are no questions, I refer to page 81 now. So this summary highlights the 2024 capital program by functional area. First project there, general government, is the development charge study. The one under the medical center is the refurbishment of the parking lot at the back. The Belmont Library one is flooring that's being done in the basement. The fire department is mainly the truck that you just approved recently. The tender on it is 930,000 of that $1 million. the roads, which is significant, I would ask you to turn to page 93 and we'll go through that specifically. You're all familiar with the first project, Front Street.
Mr. Aristone, sorry,
yes.
Councillor Connors.
Through you, Mayor. Mr. Aristone, item on page 84, the medical center parking lot for $150,000. I mean, to me, it seems to be okay. Is there a reason why we're doing this?
I would defer that to Mr. Brook.
Mr. Brooks.
Through you to Councillor Connors. Staff are proposing replacement of that parking lot because it's in poor condition and we've had trip and falls in the parking lot over the past year.
Councillor, or sorry, Deputy Mayor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Is it possible that we could possibly patch that parking lot for one more year and then maybe put that money towards a sidewalk for McBain?
Mr. Brooks.
It's possible that we could continue to patch it. We would cold patch that parking lot due to the fact that there's nowhere to patch to. It's basically all alligator cracked. So there's no specific area that we can, patch, the way that we would want to do it. But that's council's decision. We can continue to cold patch the parking lot to get us through another year.
Thank you, Mr. Aristone, and then Deputy Mayor.
The only thing I would point out to Deputy Mayor, the funding for that parking lot comes out of the parking reserve. That's what we raised that money for in that reserve, is to rehabilitate parking lots within Port Stanley. So it wouldn't necessarily be appropriate to use it for something other than a parking lot in Port Stanley because it was raised through that revenue.
Okay. Councillor Graham.
Through you, Mayor, to Mr. Aristone. We're using those parking funds for other things as well, though. So potentially we could be using it for something like a sidewalk in Lyndhurst, could we not? Because it's not just for that parking lot, my understanding.
Mr. Aristone, please.
Yeah, the only reason we're using it for bylaw enforcement is because a resolution of council was passed to do that. So that direction was already given on that. I'm just suggesting that's typically when you raise money for purpose, you use it for that purpose. Yeah, you can change that purpose, but if the sidewalk is important, I'm sure we can find another source to do that.
Thank you. Councillor or Mr. Brooks and then Councillor Graham. Thank you.
It would be my recommendation that the funds for from the parking reserve either be used to rehabilitate parking lots down in Port Stanley or to help offset the additional costs that come from operating the tourist center down in Port Stanley, such as the beach services and harbor, rather than getting into municipal wide infrastructure projects.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Councillor Graham, did you want to follow up?
Yeah, sure. I think, we spend a lot of money in Port Stanley. And we all know that. I think that, if it takes a resolution by council, so be it. I thought that, money that we were raising through some of the parking funds in Port Stanley that we could be using and dispersing out for the rest of the municipality. I think that's a fair thing to do. And I think that, we're not spending a lot of money in Lyndhurst. So something like the Turvey Park lighting or the sidewalk on McBain would be a valid reason to use some of that money from the port parking.
Thank you. Councillor Connors.
Through you, Mayor, to Mr. Brooks. The parking lot down in Port Stanley for the medical center, I'm assuming, and I don't know this, so please clarify. I'm assuming that people that are handicapped may be tripping and falling there more so than just regular people that can, I don't know, for lack of a better description, get around normally. I mean, would it be a benefit at all to provide more handicap parking close to the door so that these people would have less distance to travel, as well as patching up the parking lot?
Mr. Brooks.
The potential is there to take a look at that. I'm not sure whether or not those trip and falls were from handicapped individuals or not. So, we can take a look at moving some handicap spaces around. Getting back to the paid parking reserve, I would suggest that, again, that money be used for those additional expenses that come from Port Stanley. Otherwise, we're just going to be offsetting the costs to do infrastructure projects in other parts of the municipality. We're just going to offset those funds with tax funds going down to Port Stanley. So the more we can utilize that paid parking reserve down in Port Stanley for Port Stanley specific projects that must be done, I think the better.
Understood. I have Councillor Graham, then Councillor Halpin and Councillor Connors.
Thank you, through Mayor Sloan. I do think a fundamental principle of service fees is that there are some people using things more than others. And ideally, a service fee means that you take more money from those who are using so that you're not disproportionately drawing from the people not using it. Like with our waste bins, if you're taking more tonnage of garbage, you are paying for more tonnage of garbage. The principle with our parking was that we have people from outside of Central Elgin who come and use our beach. And if those people pay for parking, then those people help to pay for the additional service needs for Port Stanley and its beaches, right? So I do see what Mr. Brooks is saying, that ideally, if we have people from other places paying in so that Port Stanley has better amenities, then those service costs should stay there. And that way we don't have people fretting about how much of their tax dollar is spent to beautify Port Stanley if, say, they're from Belmont and never using it. So I do think there's something to be said for keeping those things separate from one another.
Thank you, Councillor Halpin. Councillor Graham.
Through you to Councillor Connors. So with regards to the handicap parking spots, I believe there's 3 on the west side of the parking lot and 2 on the east side of the parking lot. And it's not that large of a parking lot, so there's a fair amount. I will say as well that it is across from one of the most popular bars in town as well, so.
Thank you. Councillor Connors.
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Halpin and to Mr. Brooks. The people that are paying for parking in Port Stanley could well be from outside of Central Elgin. But I assure you, there's a number of people within Central Elgin that are paying for that parking too. And I think, overall, the fee that they're collecting is not so much for Port Stanley, but for Central Elgin. And I think that those fees should be fairly used throughout Central Elgin for specific projects. And lastly, the $125,000 that you have set aside for the sidewalk on McBain, is that just on McBain or does that cover Wellington as well?
Mr. Brooks, please.
I'll start with the reserve fund. So the reason I would recommend that is if you take a look at the beach services, we spend roughly $750,000 specifically just on the beach. So those paid parking revenues can, in the future, be helped to offset some of those costs. As far as the sidewalk on McBain, that sidewalk would be constructed from on McBain to Edgewell, from Edgewell west down McBain and south to link up with the existing pathway at the park.
Thank you. Councillor Watson, please.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. This is just an idea, but to hit on Councillor Connor's point, is there a way that we could take some of that parking revenues and allot 25% of it for the greater good of all Central Elgin? That's just something I'd like to put forward.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Always something we can consider. I'm not sure that we'd be doing it right here, right now, but noted.
It should be for greater good, 25%.
Thank you. Mr. Aristone.
Just since I've been here, that's something I've recommended to staff because I wasn't sure. There's a lot of stuff happening in Port Stanley Beach, parking, all those things should be reviewed and decide how you use the revenues versus the expenses in that area. So that's something, I've suggested to staff going forward, they should do that, hopefully with resolution, something before the 2025 budget.
Thank you. We have Neil here, so he's heard the instruction and glad that staff supports. It sounds like a good idea, Mr. Airstone.
The other thing I was mentioned, if council wishes to add some of the projects on that list, you know, I really believe it should come out of that infrastructure reserve. One thing I haven't mentioned is in the summary, it shows the surplus of about $1 million. Now, that's not final, but, you know, at some point, there'll be a report coming to you from the director of that time to say, okay, here's the final surplus for 2024. Here's where it's suggested to go. I mean, I've already suggested to the budget committee that probably should go into the infrastructure reserve to help you do these capital things you want to get done. But we're not at a point to do that yet.
Thank you. Councillor Connors.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Watson and to Mr. Airstone. First of all, great suggestion from Councillor Watson. I like that one. Should we be talking about the other project? You just mentioned the other project. So the other one I want to focus on is the lighting in Turvey Park. And, you know, we had a town hall last year and this was brought forward at the town hall. And people want lighting there because they're coming home from work, they're walking at night, they're walking their dogs, they're doing whatever in the park and there's no lighting. And if there's a problem from the standpoint that they need help, the police will refuse to go into that park because it's not lit. So it's a huge subdivision that's around there. And it's one of the things I want to bring forward from a safety standpoint that we really need to consider doing this year.
Thank you. Comment, Deputy Mayor, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Brooks, how many other parks do we have in Central Elgin that are lit? Can you round that?
Mr. Brooks.
I don't believe any of our other parks are lit.
Thank you. Councillor Graham.
I believe Hoffhouse Park is lit up, correct?
Mr. Brooks.
Actually, I believe you're right. We do have lights down along the walkway on Hoffus.
Deputy Mayor, follow up? Okay, thank you. Mr. Airstone, proceed.
Just to comment before, so I would reiterate, if there's things that council want to add, I would suggest to come out of the infrastructure reserve, just to, because that's the purpose of why we're setting it up. And at some point, you could talk about what's going on in port, parking revenues, beach costs, maintenance on the beach, and how those revenues may be split. I don't think that's a question none of us can answer right today.
Thank you.
So going on, we're on page 93, which is the capital budget for 2024 for the roads. And Front Street, I won't talk about because council's familiar with that. The resurfacing program, 1.6 million. It's funded partly by levy and some grants. It's an important part of the rehabilitation of the roads. It needs to be done every year. The annual bridge and culvert rehabilitation program, that's money that goes into a reserve, and that's something that was suggested by your asset management plan. Am I right on that, Director Brooks? Yeah. The next one is the first of the projects involving the Port Stanley Stormwater Management project that's going to go over a number of years. And the funding of it, 40% grant comes from the DMAF, and 60% is our contribution, and it's coming out of levy. The other major two are the transfer to infrastructure reserve. I've already talked to the 1.6 million, and then there's the annual fleet, which is replacement of our vehicles, and that's funded from the reserve that we have established for that.
Can I just interrupt? I think the Deputy Mayor has a question and I have one after. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just for clarification, the design for that Port Stanley stormwater management is 763,000.
Mr. Brooks?
That's correct. That detailed design will undertake all the design for all the stormwater works throughout the west beach area of Port Stanley.
Deputy Mayor?
And that would be completed this year, the design part of that?
We anticipate the environmental assessment that we're currently working on to wrap up in May or June. As soon as the environmental assessment wraps up, we will put out a proposal for detailed design.
Thank you.
Any further questions on capital budget for the roads?
Yep, Counselor Watson, and then I have a quick question.
Through you, Mayor. Just going back to the roads, some of them have to be gravel resurfaced, but then the same roads again are going to be pulverized and double surface treated. Can we, can you just tell me how both those processes work together? Like, will some of those have less gravel put back on? Like, some of these things are getting a lot of treatments there. To Mr. Brooks.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Brooks.
Through you to Councillor Watson, some of the roads that we have proposed, they're not necessarily rebuilds, but what we'll do is the ride performance of some of these roads, we lose that ride performance. So what we'll do is we'll go in and pulverize the current tar and chip that's there. We'll come in, put another layer of gravel over it, and then we'll put another double surface treatment over it, or a tar and chip over that to kind of rehabilitate the platform of the road.
And just to follow up here, I was just checking, consulting with the Deputy Mayor, the Dexter Line land purchase, that's a erosion related issue?
That's correct. It's due to erosion and a municipal drain that outlets off of the bluffs out on the east side of Central Elgin.
Thank you. Further questions? Mr. Airstone? Deputy Mayor?
Okay.
I'm just going to yell here soon. Through you, with the Dexter Line property, are we anticipating in the next few years to continue to buy property along there because of erosion?
Sir?
We don't anticipate purchasing any other properties out there. This is specifically due to a single municipal drain that has become a burden for the municipality to make repairs to, just due to the health and safety aspects of putting machinery out near the edge of the bluffs.
Thank you, sir. Deputy, you're good? Perfect. Thank you very much. Back to you, Mr. Airstone.
If there's no further questions on the roads part, then I go back to the summary on page 81. Waste management, 100,000 is rehabilitation of an old landfill site. The parks is on page 103. The major item there is the Kokomo Park development. Otherwise, everything else are minor projects. I don't know if you have any questions on those.
Just a quick question on procedure, Mr. Brooks. When do we start the Kokomo Park development, please?
With council approval on the project, it's been agreed upon between staff and the developer who is contributing funds towards the park build, is that the developer would take on the administrative role of designing the park. Obviously, the design would be subject to council approval, but the project would begin immediately upon council approval.
Great, thanks. And just to confirm, I think we've chatted, but to the public, there will be pickleball courts that will not just be accessible by the Kokomo residents, but by all of Central Elgin, correct?
That's correct. It'll be a public park open to anyone.
Thank you. We'll have to work on the comms on that one because I keep getting asked. Counselor Graham. Thank you, Mr. Brooks.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Brooks, will there be lighting in that park at night?
Mr. Brooks.
Through you to Councillor Graham, it's not anticipated that we will be installing.
Thank you,
lights.
Mr. Brooks. Counselor Connors.
So through you, Mayor, I'm sorry to back you up, Mr. Stowe, but back on page 93, you talk about the annual fleet replacement program. It further breaks it down on page 100. And the ask is solid waste truck, grader replacement, tractor replacement, one light duty and two heavy duty pickup trucks. I'm wondering if there's a possibility here where we could manage this. And I'm not saying that we're not managing it, but if we could manage to retain one of those pickup trucks, maybe, and replace the other two. Ultimately, what I'd like to see is if we have 3 pickup trucks, we stagger them year over year so that we're not taking the hit all in 1 year. We're spreading that hit out over the period of 3 years. So, I mean, I don't think we can do that by the sound of the kilometers on 2 of these trucks, but I'm wondering if we can keep the light duty one, and I suspect that's the F-350, and then keep that one this year, replace the other 2, and then next year, replace the 350.
Thank you. And Mr. Brooks, before I pass it over, do you know how many trucks we have as a municipality? That's a question I get asked a lot.
I don't have the number, but I can report back to council.
Sure, sometime.
It's
don't
in the
worry.
neighborhood of around 25.
Okay.
But to Councillor Connor's question there, staff can certainly look at retaining a truck and spreading it out. However, I would suggest there probably is going to be another 2-3 trucks that come up next year to be replaced. So I don't know that we would actually be staggering it out. We would just kind of be kicking it down the road to another budget year where we're likely going to propose another 2 or 3 trucks be replaced.
Thank you, sir. I have Counselor Graham and then the Deputy Mayor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Brooks, do we have a mechanic on staff?
Mr. Brooks.
We have 3 mechanics on staff.
I have Deputy Mayor and then sorry, do you want a supplemental?
Yeah, just a quick supplemental. So when we say on staff, that means they're salaried employees. So they're working on our fleet trucks, correct?
That is correct.
Mr. Brooks. I have Deputy Mayor.
Just to speak to that too, I think in the fire budget, there's some of our mechanics work on the fire trucks as well. That's part of that in the fire budget as well? We see that.
How's it billed through, Chief?
That is correct. It is billed through the fire service for the time in which they do work on the fire vehicles.
Thank you, sir. Supplemental and then Counselor Halpin.
Sorry, I stepped in on that other one and I still had a question. In the budget, I didn't see, I think we've had a couple vehicles that went to gov bids, but I didn't see in the budget where we got reimbursed for those, or am I assuming something?
Mr. Brooks.
I don't believe we replaced any trucks in 2023, so you won't see any revenue coming for those trucks. However, we didn't show this as revenue in the 2024 budget, but with the replacement of these trucks, we would auction off the existing trucks. So there would be a revenue coming back for the sale of this equipment.
Thank you, Mr. Aristone, and then Counselor Halpin.
So when you do auction off vehicles, those receipts usually go back into the reserve where the vehicles were paid out of, just as part of the process.
Thank you, Counselor Halpin.
Thanks. I just wanted to comment about the reserve as well. Counselor Connors asked a good question about how we can better stagger our vehicles so they don't come up at once. And I mean, as Mr. Aristone said, money that we receive for vehicles goes into the fleet reserve, but also we try to keep a steady amount of money going into that reserve every year. And that way, if there's spikes or dips in how many vehicles need work, there should still be a steady savings account so that it's not a sudden hit to the actual amount that is being used that we're taking from the public that year.
I agree and thank you. So Mr. Conkelman, we have or Counselor Watson's suggestion as a follow-up. Now we have Counselor Connors' suggestion as a follow-up. Mr. Counselor Connors.
Yes, through you, Mayor. I don't want to step out of line or anything here, so I just want to ask this question. Is there is there a chance that we could get a projection of what the fleet looks like and how many vehicles we have versus and when they're coming up, so we can be conscious of that when we're going through the budget? And the other part of the question, Mr. Brooks, is there, I mean, you've got 1.337900 million here for this. So is there a separation between the solid waste truck, the grader, and the tractor, and the 3 pickup trucks? Is there a separation there? Can you put a number to the 3 of them and the other 3?
Thank you. Mr. Brooks.
Sorry if I'm understanding correctly. Are you asking for a specific
breakdown.
cost for each one of those? Okay. Okay, so the garbage truck is estimated to cost approximately 500,000. The grader is expected to cost roughly, well, I've got 588,000. Were those the only 2 pieces of equipment you were specifically asking about? The tractor? The tractor I have in here for 6. Hope all this adds up, but it's 70,000 for the F-350, 65,000 for the F-250, and 50,000 for the light duty.
We're not, Counselor Connors? Okay. Counselor Graham?
And through you, Mr. Mayor, to Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, did we not just sell a garbage truck because we lost the recycling?
Sorry, thank you, Counselor Graham. Mr. Brooks.
Through you to Councilor Graham, we leased a 3rd garbage truck that we gave up in July of 2023. So we no longer pay that lease. So we own the 2 that we've retained.
Very good, thank you. But we're not leasing the new one. I guess we've tried that. Is it, like when I look at a lease as a person, they tell me it's 6 to 1, half dozen the other, depending on your situation. Is that the same with the municipality? Mr. Brooks?
A leased garbage truck over the course of 7 years, which is what the expected life of a garbage truck is going to cost roughly $800,000 for that lease, as compared to $500,000 to purchase it outright. Now, there are other maintenance costs that will come up as a result of owning it instead of leasing it. But we do believe that, you know, the overall cost is cheaper to own than it is to lease.
Thanks for that. Good counsel. Also, your numbers do add up. I'm very pleased to say, as we knew they would. Deputy Mayor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and I know the Waste Department has been doing some work to lower that budget, and that's appreciated too. I saw that in the budget.
Yes, thank you very much. Counselor Graham.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, not to be nitpicky, but do we oil undercoat all our vehicles every year?
Yes, we do.
Premium unleaded fuel, just a joke. Mr. Aristone, over to you.
I think we were done parks and we were going on to water, which is on page 108, the summary. And the major project in there is the water meter replacement, which is coming out of a grant that we're using. And then the SCADA system upgrades in the Belmont Creek crossing, which I think started in 2023 and will be finished in 2024. And I don't have any, are there any further questions on water? There's wastewater. I don't have any comments on that unless there's questions.
have questions through staff or whomever. We had a vote here to put off a water increase. What's the status on that? Ms. Brooks?
Staff intend to bring a report here shortly to address that.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
And the last item is the harbor, which is the asset management plan for the harbor. And I sort of described that in my report, what that's going to do. And that concludes the capital project portion. Are there any questions on any of it?
Just to the next page here with respect to the development charges study.
Yes.
So when does that, is that in that, how long does that process expected to take, please?
It typically is a year, and you need to do it before your bylaw expires, because then you can't charge the development charges once it expires. So I think our expires sometime next year, so we should probably start that pretty soon this year.
I agree. Is this done this is a third party that does this, Mr. Brooks?
That's correct.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Deputy?
I just want to verify that the harbor, we used the last of the harbor funds to dredge it. So going forward, we're going to need to start putting money away for future dredging, say in the early 30s.
Yes, that's true. You spent 3 million in 2023 on the harbor dredge. 2 million used up the rest of the reserve, and then 1 million came out of your working capital reserve.
And let's hope that the government at some point continues or has environmental funds available for us, as it's obviously can be linked right back to many things, including the climate. Any other questions or comments? Deputy Mayor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Just sliding back to the fire budget, the charger I see is still on there. And I'm just wondering, is that still a vehicle that's needed?
Good question. Thank you. Chief?
So earlier, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Deputy Mayor Noble, earlier I was asked to have an appraisal done on that vehicle. That appraisal was done at Elgin Chrysler. Their appraised value for that car is $12,000. Is it required at this point in time? No, it is not.
Thank you, sir.
That being said, if the budget approves, there was a request for a fire inspector in that budget, which at some point in time, they may need a vehicle, whether that's the Charger, as it's not an appropriate vehicle for a fire service that I've deemed. However, there may be one required. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Deputy?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, I agree that the charger, if you have somebody out doing fire inspections, it'd be pretty hard to strap a ladder on the roof of it. So, yeah.
Thank you. So we're just finishing the capital part. And before we go, do we have any more questions on capital right this instant? Would it be okay with you, since we've been an hour, Mr. Arstone, to just have a 5-minute recess? Okay, thanks. We're recessed for 5 minutes.
Hello.
Hey there.
Hello?
Hey, Dave, we're just on recess for, I think, another minute or two, and then we'll be back into the fray.
Perfect. I was just checking, to make sure my audio worked. I'm still kind of in class and I've got about 15 kids looking at me like I'm got 3 heads. So I'll just keep monitoring. Thanks.
Hope it's civics and careers.
No, it's this is grade 12 health and nutrition.
Recess is over. Thank you very much. Mr. Arstone, sir. Question first. Counselor Connors.
Through you, Mayor. So just before we go to the next section, I'd like to propose that we look at a few things. I mean, as a representative for Ward 4, I need to advocate for Ward 4. And we want to definitely do the lighting in Turvey Park and the sidewalk. And a way to do that would be to ask staff to go back and have a look at the sale of the charger for 12,000, the not paving of the parking lot on the medical center at 150. The planning department. So with planning, I don't know if we can talk about that at this point.
I think we should probably not. Is that
Okay.
fair? But I think we're kind of between a rock and a hard place on that one, Counselor Connors. Is that,
Okay.
but I understand, sorry to interrupt. I understand that where you're going and that's something that council could ask for how any change might be considered. Is that fair?
The new position of the fire inspector, I'd just like to have another look at that. And the harbor management action plan, or asset plan, I mean, it's a $50,000 cost that it's not necessary right now. We could push it to next year. And I mean, I'd like to have people have a look at this and see if we can come up with some funds to assist Ward 4.
Thank you, Ward Forward. Counselor Connors. Counselor Halpin, please.
Thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. I do think anything we can do, particularly about the sidewalk, which I do view as more of a safety and more of a universal matter, anything that we can do, I think is great. But it is important that we remember as well that there are certain coins that have to go into certain piggy banks. Like we do sell vehicles and put it into the vehicle fund so that then we can replace fleet out of fleet. So unless we're going to fully restructure the policies for the way that all of the money is managed in our municipality, and that's a much bigger conversation than just the budget for this year, we need to still try to operate within the correct procedures and protocols there. Some of those things we might be able to do, but others, I think we would really need to hear a bit more from staff about if that's acceptable.
That's to your point about hearing from staff. Thank you, Counselor Connors. Okay. What was your, just go ahead. Did you want to answer that, Mr. Airstone, or how do you want to do? Do you want us to go, tell me what would be best suited for you, sir?
Well, I think I've already stated that if you're going to add some projects, that I would suggest to come out of the infrastructure reserve. That's the purpose of it. And it's raised, I mean, it's created and it's money's put in there from the general taxes of the whole municipality. So it would be appropriate to come out of that.
Okay. Counselor Connors or Deputy Mayor, comments, please?
Just a couple. I agree that I think the sidewalks is important. I'm just wondering if there could be something else looked at for the lighting to reduce that cost. Because it's kind of, it's a big one. The other thing is Councilor Connors said the fire inspector. This is also a training coordinator position. And I was just wondering if maybe the chief could speak to that, to talk to the whole thing, because I believe there's some legislation coming in 2026 that makes this a little bit time sensitive.
Thank you. Chief?
Thank you through you, Mayor, to Deputy Mayor Noble. That is correct. In 2020, beginning in 2026, there is mandates from the Ontario Fire Marshal that all firefighters within the province of Ontario be certified. In 2026 are our general levels such as firefighter certification, fire inspector, company officer, and there are a number of other positions. And then in 2028, any of those specialty programs that would impact a fire service for responses that you do, such as our auto extrication calls, our confined space rescue team and our high angle rescue team and our water and ice rescue teams will all have to be certified to a provincial or national standard by 2028 of that year.
And those certifications, Chief, are done by whom?
Those certifications are done through the Ontario Fire College and administered through both the regional training schools, which we were fortunate enough to have one in Elgin, Middlesex, a regional training school, as well as can be performed with allowances from the OFM internally as well. So
Okay.
saves us from having administration costs for going outside.
So just to confirm here, there's nothing that we need to do that this position does for 2026. So it's not mandated that we have this position for 2026.
To you, your mayor, the issue is they must reach these certifications by 2026. After 2026, if you are not certified for the position that you are doing, you cannot legally be a firefighter in the province of Ontario. So all of the recruits right now must meet 1001 standard of firefighter aspect. any of the officers that we have who would be in charge of a fire must have officer level 2. Anyone doing inspections must be, depending upon the inspection, level 1 or level 2 inspector. And as I said, so on and so forth. So by 2026, they must be certified.
Okay, and I'm just going to continue on one more here. So when we've got the proposals for a fire prevention / training coordinator, the training's done mostly by a third party. With respect to fire prevention, you're talking about someone that would go to the schools, I take it?
To you, Mayor. Not so much to go to schools, but the intent is right now, when we send a student to a school, we pay a registration fee. Currently, a number of the programs are offered to the Elgin Middlesex Regional Training Facility. Some are offered at, for example, Grimsby Fire Academy and different areas across the province, which then entails us registration fees as well as sending students away for the period of that course, paying mileage, paying hotel, and paying their fees. The hope would be that with the training fire inspector training officer, we could start to get some of those programs in-house to help alleviate some of the costs of sending students elsewhere for that training.
Thank you. Councillor Halpin, then Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now I feel badly because I'm jumping away from fire again, but I'm just looking at the numbers for Councillor Connor's projects here. And what has been recommended by Mr. Aristone is a 2% increase, which amounts to about $4, a little less than $4 per family per month. And a total of about $344,000 available for infrastructure. And the projects that you're looking at are $350,000 of infrastructure. So if we were to take the staff recommendation, that would just about exactly cover the things that you're concerned with.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Graham first, and then, Mr. Brooks. Thank you.
So just quickly through you, Mr. Mayor, I think that there's ways that we don't need to be raising people's taxes in these difficult times to cover the Lyndhurst projects. I mean, we've already outlined some of them. And whether we're putting in money into one reserve and taking out for another reserve, to me, that equals each out. And now to go back to the fire inspector and training position, to me, I would like to see that position pushed to 2025. And in the meantime, we look at shared services with other tiers within Elgin County. I think that at this time, that's a large savings that we could be looking at for, again, difficult times for people paying their mortgages and their taxes. So I would like to see council consider that as having staff come back in 2024 with discussion on shared services or contracted services potentially for that position, rather than hiring a full-time employee at almost $103,000.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. Mr. Brooks.
Through your Mayor Sloan, I just wanted to speak briefly on the Harbor Asset Management Plan. OREG 588 suggests that the municipalities are required to have their asset management plans completed by July 1st of 2024. However, with this harbor plan, it's unlikely that we're going to meet that deadline. But I also wanted to add that that project is being funded by the Harbor Reserve, and Harbor Reserve funds are may not be able to be used for infrastructure projects in Lyndhurst. The other thing I wanted to just mention is we have a bit of a sleeping giant with the harbor, and there is a lot of potentially big costs coming with the harbor, talking about dredging. There's a lighthouse that may require foundation repair. We need to take a look at the condition of the seawall out there. So the quicker we can get that information here, the better that we can plan for those future costs, which, could be quite high.
Thank you. Councillor Graham.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Brooks, do we already have a pre-existing harbor management asset plan?
We do not. The municipality hasn't undertaken an asset management plan for the harbor specifically.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Aristone.
There are no further questions. I'll finish my sort of review
Sure.
and get you to turn to page 124. In this section is the first sort of analysis is the projected reserve balances for 2023. And I use the word projected because we haven't got the year end done. So these are what we are estimating at the time that the budget was put out. Then the next schedule is the 2024 estimated reserve balances, and that's the estimated at the end of 2023. And then we show everything that's coming in and out of the reserves through the 2024 budget for your information. But just to highlight a thing on page 126, we have a estimated net increase of about 2.452 million going into reserves. And on page 129 for 2024, we have a projected $4.5 million coming out of reserves. So. Are there any questions on that, sort of those schedules?
Questions, comments from council? No.
If not, the next.
Very well laid out.
If no questions there, the next section is on page 131, which is just a summary of the insurance costs that have changed from 2024 to from the 2023 to 2024 budget for your information. And then the last schedule is the business improvement area budget that was approved by the general membership and presented to council in the amount of $80,000.
Just have a question on insurance, Mr. Airstone, and this is for general council as well. There are some municipalities that are bonding together to do their own insurance. I sat with a gentleman from the mayor of Ajax who mentioned that he did it. I know that's a larger municipality, but I have some issues, as we found, probably the council have as well, with our parades. They used to be covered under a blanket policy. From what I can see in this organization and any other, we seem to be getting increased prices every year and fewer services. My concern about things like a parade are, firstly, there's no tickets sold. Okay, so next Monday, when people come to Port Stanley for the solar eclipse, we will be handled under our $560,000 in insurance. But if parade is put on, again, no tickets, you can come and watch the parade, or maybe you're just walking your dog and not going to the parade and you slip and fall. We're having our groups, our service clubs being asked to pay these substantial costs for special riders, and it just doesn't seem fair. So that my comment to Mr. Airstone, I know you've worked in other jurisdictions. Is there ever the possibility that other areas, other municipalities could bond together, if you will, and try to self-insure for rebates?
There are some municipalities that do their insurance jointly. I can't really speak to the the legal aspects of all that, but that's something you maybe should have your new director looked at.
Okay, just wondered if you'd had any experience with that. Thank you.
Yeah, generally speaking though, why we require, special events that happen in our municipality to be insured separately is because carriers won't cover something that isn't a specific municipal event under your insurance. There was some new stuff that came out, I'm going to say 5 years ago, where some of the insurance companies were providing reduced cost to these entities, i.e., as an example, so somebody didn't have to go use their house insurance when they provide, rented a pavilion, let's say in a park from municipality. They could just buy a $25 rider on the municipal thing and have their event covered for their family thing. So there is that out there, and that's something, I don't know if your current policy has that or not. I just haven't been here long enough to know that.
Okay, thank you. Something to look into. Deputy Mayor has a comment.
Through you, Mayor. I believe part of it too is when we ask for outside insurance to cover events is to limit our liability on that and if one of those events there is a incident, then it also increases staff time on that. So I realize it's an added cost, but it also limits our liability.
I'm done with my presentation, so really I'm looking for direction on council based on the recommendation that was made.
Thank you, Mr. Arsenault. Councillor Connors.
Through you, Mayor. So I think I'd like to look at those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, those 6 items and see if that can happen. I mean, I don't know about the asset management plan, being that it has to be done by July 1st, 24. I mean, could it be pushed in the date? I mean, I don't know, but the 6 items I listed, I'd like to have staff review and come back and see if we can somehow not cancel, but push certain items and in order to bring forward some work in Ward 4.
Thank you, Councillor Connors. Councillor Graham, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Connors, I think at this point, because I think it's more for council to decide at this point, rather than staff to come back with that. I think we have to decide, you know, do the majority want to look at staff bringing back a report in 2024 about shared services potentially for the fire personnel. So we're saving 100 and, well, potentially with selling the Charger as well, we're saving 104, almost $115,000 there. So I think that's for council, for us to decide. The parking lot, the pharmacy parking lot, just to patch that, saving at $150,000 there. Potentially one of the trucks, the fleet trucks, saving $50,000 there. And then if there's any savings that we staff can come back and give us a educated estimate on for reducing the amount that is put in the 2024 planning budget. I think those are directions that need to come from council and to as well decide on if we want to move forward with, again, providing that 0% tax increase, since the county has provided 3.9% at this point, which is going to hit people hard. So again, I would like to, you know, we potentially have things coming in from a large thing coming in from other areas for money and that we can put into our reserves and to use in other areas. So I want us to all keep those things in mind when, again, what we're supposed to be doing is taking a look at how we can help our residents in the difficult times that we're all facing right now.
Thank you. And also just one more point here. If the council wants me to take those items individually and vote on them, if that's your recommendation, I'm happy to. Councillor, sorry, will you comment, Deputy?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I know Mr. Airstone has spoken to the sidewalk possibly for Lyndhurst, and there's an opportunity to maybe take that money out of the reserve. And then I'm just wondering if we have a look at the lighting down the road and see if there's a way to fund that with other funds that may come available. And then the other one I did want to speak to Chief Omrod. Is there an opportunity to do shared services? Just before we vote on stuff, I think we should have the information. Is there an opportunity to do shared services with that? Because I think that's an important one as well.
Let the chief speak first and then Councillor Halpin. Chief.
Through you, Mayor Sloan, through Deputy Mayor Noble, there is avenues for cost sharing. Fire chiefs within Elgin County were aware that I had put this in, and one of the questions that they had asked was, would there be an opportunity to cost share an employee if we did have one? There is one fire inspector right now who is a retired gentleman who is assisting with already four municipalities, I believe. I'm not sure what his workload is, if he would be available to cost share for us. But there is an avenue, I believe, to cost share the other way if we did have someone.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Halpin.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Sloan. Last year, we spent a lot of days doing our budget, and this year we looked to make that more efficient by doing a committee to pick through things and then hopefully bringing this back more efficiently. And I think that works well as long as we don't then dive back into the weeds and look for full reports. Last year, we looked for a lot of reports back between sessions. I think at this point being already April, it would be worth our voting yes or no on individual issues if we want to. And I do love the idea of shared services, and I think that's great. But some of these, we might take a month or more getting a report back on, and I don't want us to get to June. So it might be worth us trying to move forward with this budget and asking for reports so we can plan to do this earlier next year, if we prefer to do this as a whole council each time.
Thank you. Councillor Graham, please.
So, through you, Mr. Mayor, I would agree with Councillor Halpin and with the mayor as well, that if we can take each item individually and vote on it as a council right now, including the Turvey Park and the McBain sidewalk. Because I don't think, other than the shared services, that would be the only one that I would, shared services for the fire inspector, that would be the only one that I would be recommending moving forward with a staff report back on that, rather than approving it. So if we, I'm going to vote against it, obviously, so that we can have that report back, because I'd like a little more information on what that would look like with shared services, rather than saying that we're going to be spending $103,000, almost a full point of our taxpayers' tax increase.
Thank you. So why don't we do that? Is that okay with council if we have a show of hands and a vote on, first of all, it is essentially deferring the fire hire to look at till 2025 and to currently look at some shared services or having the chief come back with a report. Is that fair? Are you going to make the motion? Oh, okay. Motion, question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Chief Omrod, is there an opportunity for us to gain revenue from other municipalities with this hired position to support them?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Deputy Mayor Noble. Yes, if were able to engage other municipalities in a shared service, then they would be paying for the time that that individual was working for their municipality.
Right. So again, if I do a show of hands, Ms. Greeno? I don't need an official vote, do I?
Mr. Mayor, if you're going
Sorry.
to have a
That's
motion.
okay, we're
you
quite
will-
informal.
you will need to- We need to have a motion in order to proceed.
Okay. So we're gonna take 3 items and we're gonna make this a little quicker. So. Okay, that's fine. Councillor Graham, did you want to make a motion?
Yeah, make a motion to divide those 6 issues and have votes on each individual one.
Can I get a seconder? Councillor Connors?
One second, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Leach? Would you have a motion, or do you need some clarification or direction for a motion?
I just need one moment. Thank you.
No hurry. Thank you, Delaney, very much. We should probably just let Delaney finish here and then we'll, if that's okay. Thank you, Councillor Connors. Mr. Aristone.
Just to clarify, so whatever the motion is, if it's adding something, we need to know the source of the funding so we can properly put it through the budget. Or if it's taking something out, what happens to that extra levy or whatever is applicable to it? What we're going to do with that too?
Is it fair that we could go through the motions, Mr. Aristone, and at the end we could give recommendation or we could ask your counsel on that matter?
Well.
We don't really know yet whether, how the votes are going to go on the individual
No,
item.
no, but we do need to identify, if you're removing or adding costs, how they're funded, right?
Understood. Sorry, Ms. Leach.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Counselor Graham, seconded by Counselor Connors, that the question be divided in order to consider individual expenditures.
All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Thank you. So, Mr. Airstone, I appreciate your concern, or your interest is that does it have to be during the motion? Or is it a technical thing after the motion is passed of where the budget comes and goes? Could you comment, sir?
Well, it's just that eventually you have to pass a motion saying how much of the levies we're going to raise, how much we're going to expend operating wise, how much in capital expenditures. So I need to accumulate that number based on your changes, right? So that takes me some time. Right? So that's all. I'm just suggesting we need to identify
Sure.
what we're changing
Okay,
on the expenditure side versus the revenue side.
fine. Okay, so our first item, I believe, is the fire to postpone the hire till 2025 and look at shared servicing. Oh, I'm sorry, Delaney, did you have a question? Comment better.
Mayor Sloan, through you to council, I would request that the vote for the last motion be recorded as Counselor Bogman is attending virtually with the camera off.
Oh, excellent point. Thank you, Ms. Leach, for your diligence. Can I call the vote, please?
Counselor Graham? Counselor Halpin?
Yes.
Counselor Watson? Counselor
Yes.
Counselor Bogman?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Noble?
Yes.
Mayor Sloan?
Yes.
That's carried. Thank you.
Councillor Graham?
I'd like to make the motion that we remove the fire inspection position for this budget and have a staff report back in 2025 on shared services.
Can I get a seconder? Councillor Connors? Yeah, that's what you do at the county.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just for clarification too, on this position, Chief Omrod, we have 103,000 or so in the budget for this. This person won't be hired till probably halfway through 2024. So I'm guessing that cost right now would be half of that for the rest of the year. That makes sense. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor Sloan. Yes, you are correct, Deputy Mayor Noble.
Thank you. So we have a seconder. Ms. Leach? Sorry.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Counselor Graham, seconded by Counselor Connors, that the fire inspector position recommended as part of the fire services budget totaling $102,769 be deferred.
All those in favor, if you could please call the vote.
Counselor Graham,
Yes.
Counselor Halpin,
No.
Counselor Watt,
Yes.
Counselor Con,
Yes.
Counselor Bogman,
No.
Deputy Mayor Noble,
No.
Mayor Sloan.
Yes.
That's carried. Thank you.
Counselor Graham,
I'd like to make a motion that we proceed with selling the charger as well.
can I get a seconder? Counselor Connors?
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Counselor Graham, seconded by Counselor Connors, the council authorized the sale of the Dodge Charger, part of the fire services fleet.
All those in favor, call the vote, please.
Counselor Graham,
Yes.
Counselor Halpin,
Yes.
Counselor Watson,
Yes.
Counselor Connors,
Yes.
Counselor Bogman,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Noble,
Yes.
Mayor Sloan.
Yes.
That's carried.
Counselor Connors, please.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we defer the repaving of the medical parking lot, medical center parking lot.
Do you have a seconder? Counselor Graham? You want to speak? Deputy Mayor, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if we're going to defer the parking, should we make a motion to repair it then? Just a question.
That's operational, you're saying? Oh. Ms. Greeno, comments? Mr. Brooks?
Staff would undertake repairs as needed through the operations budget.
Thanks, Mr. Brooks.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Connors, seconded by Councillor Graham, that the recommended repaving of the Port Stanley Medical Center parking lot totaling $150,000 be deferred.
All those in favor? Call the vote, please.
Councillor Graham,
Yes.
Councillor Halpin,
Yes.
Councillor Watson,
Yes.
Councillor Connor,
Yes.
Councillor Bogman,
No.
Deputy Mayor Noble,
Yes.
Mayor Sloan.
Yes,
That's carried.
thank you. Counselor Connors, please.
Through you, Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to defer one of the pickup trucks until next year. I think that the discretion should be given to Mr. Brooks as to which one gets deferred, but one of them should be deferred.
Thank you. Can I get a seconder? Counselor Graham. I'm sorry, Mr. Brooks, apologies.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, could I make a recommendation in that we replace all 3 pickup trucks, but we defer the replacement of the tractor?
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Yeah, it's these two.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, both of you are in agreement to change, so as a friendly amendment, then yes.
Okay.
So you wish to defer the purchase of the tractor?
Which is 6,000, I think. Yep.
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Connors, seconded by Councillor Graham, that the recommended replacement of the tractor from the vehicle reserve fund totaling $65,000 be deferred.
All those in favor? Call the vote, please.
Councillor Graham,
Yes.
Councillor Halpin,
No.
Councillor Watson,
Yes.
Councillor Connors,
Yes.
Councillor Bogman,
No.
Deputy Mayor Noble,
Yes.
Mayor Sloan.
Yes,
That's carried.
Counselor Graham, please.
I'd like to make a motion that we have staff review for a revised budget amount for planning in 2024 as well.
Counselor Connors. Ms. Greenall, please.
Council, if you would like to have conversations on this matter, I would ask that we move into closed, and so you can probably hear some information that would help you in your vote.
Do I need a motion to get into close? Counselor Graham,
I'd make the motion that we move into closed session now.
Counselor Connors,
Mayor Sloan, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Graham, seconded by Councillor Connors, the council proceed into closed session at 1:50 PM in order to address a matter pertaining to a position plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board.
all those in favor? Call the vote, please.
Councillor Graham,
Yes.
Councillor Halpin,
Yes.
Councillor Watson,
Yes.
Counselor Connors,
Yes.
Counselor Bogman,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Noble,
Yes.
Mayor Sloan.
Yes.
That's carried.